All right, thank you. Welcome to our Sunday school hour. Last week Don filled in for us as we were in Lubbock. Never been to Lubbock before. It's not a big town. We were there visiting Gideon and Natalie and visiting their church with them. Had a good time doing that. But I'm sure y'all were blessed. And it was at Barnabas you did, Don. Character study on Barnabas, that's always an interesting study. So I'm glad you got an opportunity to do that. Today, remember, we finished Numbers, and Numbers sets us up to keep going into Deuteronomy, and I feel like we ought to just go ahead and do that. Deuteronomy is an important book, and we don't have to do a whole lot of introduction for it, because Numbers is basically the introduction for Deuteronomy, so we just finished that. But one of the main things that Deuteronomy tells us specifically and makes absolutely clear is what the place of the law was in the Old Testament. Now, that's not for a bit yet, but people look at me very quizzically when they're from a different doctrinal background than El Paso Bible Church, as if how could I know for sure that the Mosaic Law has nothing to do with anybody's eternal life, and it is very clear in this book, and it's very clear that they actually haven't read the last few chapters of Deuteronomy in depth if they don't understand that. So it's important that we do it. Now, Deuteronomy means second law or second giving of the law. That's not actually what it is. It's not simply a rote recollection of the law. It's actually a bunch of sermons, a bunch of expositions of the law about the importance of the law and the ramifications of not keeping it and the consequences. So it is important that we do that. I found this is actually just a meme. This is probably the theme of Deuteronomy, roughly stated. Why y'all blaming God for your problems? Most of you like that, y'all's problems. The contraction in the possessive, y'all's problems, came from not listening to him to begin with. So we could put that on every slide in Deuteronomy, most of the slides in Numbers, and virtually all of the Pentateuch, actually, although Leviticus is a little more ambiguous about that necessarily because it is the giving of the sacrificial law. So we're going to review because Moses reviews. Remember that this is in essentially the last month before the new generation enters into the promised land. And so that's where we're starting here. Moses, in fact, verse 5 of chapter 1 says that across the Jordan in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to expound this law. That was what he was doing before he goes to be with his fathers. He knows one thing about what's coming ahead in the promised land, and that is he's not going. And so in view of that, he's preparing them. And this was the whole generation. He's the last standing member of the generation, other than Caleb and Joshua. Everybody else has died or been killed, either as a result of foolish exercises in warfare, temple prostitution, judgments, things like that. Thousands and thousands and thousands of them have dropped dead in the desert. And so that's where we are. He is the last one standing. The last prophet standing, but the last spiritual leader standing. All of the heads of the families of the previous generation have fallen. And so before he departs that earth, or this earth, he's going to make sure that he's done his level best to communicate everything that needs to be communicated. A lot of people, if they have the privilege of decline in their old age. I know that doesn't sound like a privilege, right? But not everybody gets to old age, and they don't get to decline in it, and they don't get to remember things, and they don't get to communicate the things that they remembered. But that's what he's doing here. A lot of people will go and visit with people more as they're older, right? And try to write down their memories, and there are times where I wish I had had that opportunity with certain people. Moses is writing this down. This is the most important thing that he can recollect and proclaim to the people as they enter. It is a scary thing, really, Two of my sons have left, right? That's a little scary, right? You can prepare them and say, this is what may happen, this is what may happen, this is what may happen, but I'm way over here and you're way over there. I'm not going with you. And Moses is doing that for millions of people. He is the dude. He's the guy, and he knows for sure he's not going with them. And will not be able to visit, will not be there available for consultation. I have a friend who is pastoring a church in North Texas, which was planted 25 years ago by a gentleman that is still there at the church on the elder board. And up until recently, the previous pastor who had been there for 10 years was also there and also on the elder board. And I had my misgivings about that. But it seems to have worked out okay. But they were there for consultation purposes, right? For collective memory. That's the idea, that they were there to help. And he's not going to have that. So anyway, let's look at this book. We're going to go pretty quickly because, as I said, Numbers is the introduction to Deuteronomy, and we've already done Numbers. And Moses is going to review this for them so that they don't forget. He's going to start before their lifetime and pass into their lifetime. So these are some strange pictures, but chapter 1 is broken up into, y'all were at the mountain long enough, Mount Horeb. Y'all were big fat chickens. This chicken says he's not fat, he's fluffy. And you were dumb as a box of rocks. That is my summary of chapter 1 of Deuteronomy. You were at the mountain long enough, you're big fat chickens, you were dumb as a box of rocks. So let's read. These are the words, chapter 1, verse 1 of Deuteronomy. Y'all know where Deuteronomy is? It's the 5th book of the 5 books called the Pentateuch. All right, right after Numbers. These are the words which Moses spoke to all Israel across the Jordan in the wilderness, in the Arabah, opposite Suf, between Paran and Tophel and Laban and Hazeroth and Dizahab. It is 11 days' journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. And in the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, which, remember, 40 years, that's when they're closing in on re-entering the Promised Land, Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all that Yahweh had commanded him to give to them, after he had defeated Sihon the king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon, and Og the king of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth and Edrei. Across the Jordan, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to expound this law. So he's sitting down to preach. By the way, that's the way they preached back then. I'm not sure I could do that. I don't know how you pace while you're sitting down. But I walk a lot and flail a lot, to be kind to myself, right? I talk with my hands, and I can't do that sitting down. But Moses, they did. I mean, that's what they did. They sat down. Chairs were rare, right? And in the synagogues, traditionally, the teacher would be sitting and everybody else would be standing as they listened. But Moses is sitting down to explain the importance of the law to this generation. Verse 6 says this, Yahweh our God spoke to us at Horeb, saying, you have stayed long enough at this mountain. Turn and set your journey, and go up to the hill country of the Amorites, and to all their neighbors in the Arabah, in the hill country, and in the lowland, and in the Negev by the seacoast, the land of the Canaanites and Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. See, I have placed the land before you. Go in and possess the land which Yahweh swore to give to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to them and to their descendants after them. This is yours. The time to take it is now. He's talking about history here, right? The previous generation. This is what I said to you. Go. I spoke to you at that time saying, so Moses is saying, I'm relating this to the people himself, right? I spoke to you at that time saying, I am not able to bear the burden of you alone. Yahweh your God has multiplied you, and behold, you are this day like the stars of heaven in number. May Yahweh, the God of your fathers, increase you 1,000-fold more than you are, and bless you, just as he has promised you. But how can I alone bear the load and the burden of you and your strife? It's a little bit of cognitive dissonance there, right? May God bless you with much abundance of progeny with all your strife. And there's some mixed signals, right? How can I alone bear the load and the burden of you and your strife? Choose wise and discerning and experienced men from your tribes, and I will appoint them as your chiefs or as your heads. You answered me and said, the thing which you have said to do is good. So I took the heads of your tribes, wise and experienced men, and appointed them heads over you, leaders of thousands and of hundreds, of fifties, of tens, and officers for your tribes. Then I charged your judges at that time, saying, hear the cases between your fellow countrymen, and judge righteously between a man and his fellow countrymen, or the alien who is with him. You shall not show partiality in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. You shall not fear man, for the judgment is God's. The case that is too hard for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. So what is he communicating there? He's saying you are to deliver the best judgment possible that you can possibly deliver. And I have delegated my blessing, my authority to the decisions that you make. This is a principle that extends into the Gospels, right? So a lot of people refer to Matthew 18 as the church discipline chapter. But it's also colloquially the prayer meeting chapter, right? Everybody quotes out of Matthew 18, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I will be also. That's not talking about your prayer meeting. That's not talking about your prayer meeting at all. That's talking about Matthew 18 is discipline, right? Within the congregation. I would not say that that's a church discipline, but it was a body discipline issue, a pragmatic discipline issue within the Jewish synagogue. And they were supposed to not fear handing out righteous judgment if there were 2 or 3 people that had gathered and agreed that this is the spanking this guy deserves and this is the one he doesn't deserve. That's a righteous judgment. Where 2 or 3 are gathered, there I am also. That's the authority granted to that principle. And we see that starts back here in Deuteronomy. Don't fear that you make somebody mad. Don't fear their vengeance. Don't fear revenge because they feel that they were treated unfairly. If you're appointed in this position, the judgment that you make carries God's authority and God's blessing. And then he says, the case that is too hard for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. Verse 18, I commanded you at that time all the things that you should do. And then we set out from Horeb, and we went all through that great and terrible wilderness which you saw on the way to the hill country of the Amorites, just as Yahweh your God had commanded us. And we came to Kadesh Barnea. I said to you, you have come to the hill country of the Amorites, which Yahweh our God is about to give us. See, Yahweh your God has placed the land before you. Go up, take possession, as Yahweh the God of your fathers has spoken to you. Do not fear or be dismayed. So you'll find this in Deuteronomy and in the Pentateuch. A lot of times the Amorites are used to stand in as, we might call it a metonymy, where we talk about one part as it refers to the whole. I think that's metonymy. Is that right? English major metonymy, yeah. Sometimes I have to ask my English major here if I'm using the right literary terms. They're mostly the same. And so the Amorites are used kind of as a metonymy for the Canaanites. You remember when God spoke to them, this land is yours, you shall be gone from it for generations. You'll be gone from it, but they will in the end possess it. But the reason he gives, remember, is that the sin of the Amorites is not yet complete, and they got to take centuries to complete the sin. But he's talking about the whole region, the whole people, but the Amorites apparently are the apex sinners. And that's how they stand in for all of the sin of the Canaanites. So, go on and take possession of their land. And then all of you approached me and said, let us send men before us. Now, is that God's idea, actually, to send in spies? Not the way Moses presents it here. He said, this was your pragmatic freedom to do this. You can send in men before us. What were they supposed to do? Were they supposed to send in an expeditionary force? Are they supposed to send in spies? No, because then you're going to get scared, right? You're supposed to go in and take it. Just go in there and take possession of it. But they said, well, let's waffle a little bit. let's send men before us that they may search out the land for us and bring back to us word of the way by which we should go up and the cities which we shall enter. So God's plan was, enter the land, take the first city, and once you take the first city, go to the next one and take that one. They want to strategize. They want to strategize. They want to find chinks in the armor, so to speak. They want to treat this as if it's their war, their strength, and their power that's going to do this. I try to distinguish between this. I tell people, look, I don't really handle passive aggression very well, and the reason is because I'm just aggressive. I wasn't always that way. I don't deal with passive aggression very well. I confront it with just aggression. But that is what we're seeing here, right? God doesn't want them to be sneaky, because that's not the testimony. The testimony is not designed to be, well, those Israelites, they were real tricky. They were real sneaky. They knew how to do things that nobody else knew how to do. Look at how awesome their SEAL Team 6 was, right? Because the SEAL Team, that's pretty awesome stuff. But they didn't have that. They were just supposed to go up and take it. So, Moses bows to that. Doesn't see a problem with it. Says, the thing pleased me, and I took 12 of your men, 1 man for each tribe. They turned and went up into the hill country and came to the valley of Eshcol and spied it out. And then they took some of the fruit of the land in their hands and brought it down to us. They brought us back a report and said, it is a good land which Yahweh your God is about to give us. Yet you were not willing to go. What's he? You guys are susceptible to making the same mistakes that your previous generation made, is what he's saying. You guys are bearing the baggage that comes with those decisions, and so you need to be cautioned here, right? He speaks to them with this pronoun. You guys did this. Some of them would have been alive, not counted in the census. They would have observed this. They would have seen it. They were to be cautioned about it. Remember, in fact, Moses told, what tribe? Reuben and Gad, remember? Reuben and Gad wanted to just camp out with their flocks on the east side of the Jordan because they had nice grazing there or whatever. And Moses threw this in their face. He said, you guys, let me tell you, if you guys don't go with your other tribes to go finish taking the land, you're going to suffer the same fate as these guys. God's going to let your bodies drop in the desert and give your inheritance to your children, and he'll start over. So Moses threw this back at them. They were susceptible to this. They needed this warning. You were not willing to go up, but you rebelled against the command of Yahweh your God, and you grumbled in your tents because Yahweh hates us. To drama queens there. Yahweh hates us. He has brought us out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. By the way, this is the big fat chicken portion. He's not fat, he's fluffy. Big fat chicken portion. We went in their tents. They were grumbling. God hates us. He has brought us out of the land of Egypt to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites to destroy us. Where can we go up? Our brethren made our hearts melt, saying the people are bigger and taller than we. The cities are large and fortified to heaven. They're drama queens, aren't they? The average wall around the city, a tall wall, nothing close. Nothing close. And besides, we saw the sons of the Anakim there. Then I said to you, do not be shocked, nor fear them. Yahweh your God who goes before you will himself fight on your behalf, just as he did for you in Egypt before your eyes. And in the wilderness where you saw how Yahweh your God carried you, just as a man carries his son, in all the way which you have walked until you came to this place. But for all this you did not trust Yahweh your God who goes before you on your way to seek out a place for you to encamp, in fire by night and cloud by day, to show you the way in which you should go. How did they leave Egypt? Did they have to fight their way out? Like you guys ever watched Secondhand Lions? I think Isabel, have you watched Secondhand Lions? You have, okay, all right. Isabel's lacking on some of these key movies, occasionally we find out. Secondhand Lions, right? The guy fights his way out with all the gold he can barely carry, right? Did they have to do that to walk out of Egypt laden with all the riches of the kingdom of Egypt? No. People said, please leave, and here's money. Please leave at the end of the plagues. Yahweh himself fought for them. And Moses tells them, this is within your proper expectations of entering the land. That's how it was designed to be. Walk in, possess it, it's yours. Walk in faith, and it's yours. And God's given you plenty of precedent to understand that. But for all this, you did not trust Yahweh your God, who goes before you on your way to seek out a place for you to encamp in fire by night and cloud by day, to show you the way in which you should go. Then Yahweh heard the sound of your words, and he was angry and took an oath, saying, not one of these men, this evil generation, shall see the good land which I swore to give your fathers. Except Caleb the son of Jephunneh, he shall see it, and to him and to his sons I will give the land on which he has set foot, because he has followed Yahweh fully. And the Lord Yahweh was angry with me also on your account, saying, not even you shall enter there. Joshua the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall enter there. Encourage him, for he will cause Israel to inherit it. Moreover, your little ones, who you said would become a prey, and your sons, who this day have no knowledge of good or evil, shall enter there, and I will give it to them, and they shall possess it. But as for you, turn around and set out for the wilderness by the way to the Red Sea. Turn around. It's going to look real familiar on your way back towards the Red Sea, because you're going to go backwards, and we're going to redo this. We're going to start over. Occasionally I do this to my children. I say, whatever son's name it was, son, try again. Yes, sir. Usually it only takes once. Because I'm expecting them to anticipate responding in obedience. I never had to do that with Grace. Did I have to do that with you, Grace? Never. Don't remember. Never. Not once. Maybe. I don't know. I don't remember doing that specific thing. But I do it to my sons quite frequently, because as soon as they start getting a little taller, they start getting a little surly on occasion. It's universal. It's not just my children. You get a little surly. And that's what happened here, right? They weren't ready to stand to attention in obedience. They allowed their fear and their misgivings. The fear was actually the product of their misunderstanding of God's character, wasn't it? Whether God was actually indeed telling the truth, that if you go into the land to possess it, I will hand it to you. You will possess it. I will give it to you. So turn around, retrace those steps, start over, but this time you're all going to die. Then you said to me, now we've moved from the big fat chicken part to the box of rocks part. This is the box of rocks part. Then you said to me, we have sinned against Yahweh. We will indeed go up and fight, just as Yahweh our God commanded us, and every man of you girded on his weapons of war and regarded it as easy to go up into the hill country. And Yahweh said to me, say to them, do not go up nor fight, for I am not among you, otherwise you will be defeated before your enemies. So I spoke to you, but you would not listen. Instead, you rebelled against the command of Yahweh and acted presumptuously and went up into the hill country. The Amorites who lived in that hill country came out against you and chased you, I like this, chased you as bees do, and crushed you from Seir to Hormah. Then you returned, and wept before Yahweh, but Yahweh did not listen to your voice or give ear to you. So you remained in Kadesh many days, the days that you spent there. There's some kind of silliness out there that beekeepers unfortunately help propagate, and that is that bees have only gotten aggressive in a certain time frame historically, and that they didn't chase people and didn't sting people back then. You always wonder, right, how Samson was able to go up to a bee colony that's set up in a corpse and just snatch some honey out of it. You ever wonder about that? No? Ever thought about it? I don't know anybody that would do that. Yesterday we were at the Ag Day at NMSU. I'm the president of the association, so I had to show up, even though that's not my jam. Just telling me, we had a live observation colony there on the table. Everybody's scared to death of the thing. Scared to death. It's a plexiglass observation hive. It's totally sealed up except for some ventilation. Nobody can get stung. They won't even walk up to it. And you read Samson's story, right? Not only is it a dead, nasty lion, he goes up there and just scoops honey out of a corpse. What are you thinking? Anyway, I like this, right? This is probably my beekeeper verse right here. Don't do DIY bee removals because they will chase you and crush you. People don't believe us. That was the dumb as the box of rocks part. They went up thinking that they could do what God promised to do for them themselves, and that is something that we ought to remind ourselves. We cannot seize God's promise without seizing God's promise by faith. We cannot make it happen. We can't do anything about that. So there we have the mountain, we got the chickens, we got the box of rocks. So, chapter 2. You probably can't read that stuff on the left. One of these days I'll get the proportions right. But I am a dinosaur. It's hard to do with T-Rex arms, right? Can't get it. So chapter 2. I think we got time to do chapter 2. Again, this is a review. That should all sound familiar to you if you've been here for Numbers. Did that sound familiar to you? For Exodus and Numbers? Okay. It should sound familiar to you even if you went to Sunday school a few times. Because those are some high spots. They get covered in Sunday school even when they forget about the part about Aaron dying on the mountain and all the details, which is why we teach it again. So, verse 1, chapter 2, then we turned and set out for the wilderness by the way to the Red Sea, as Yahweh spoke to me, and circled Mount Seir for many days. That's the mountain of Esau. That's in the middle of Edom. Right, so you have this guy walking in circles. That's what they did. God said, walk in circles. Sounds to me a lot like the lessons that people teach, right? You hear illustrations about a guy, usually it's a grandfather having to instill some discipline in his grandson. This is often the case when the father has not instilled this particular character trait. For whatever reason, you hear these stories out. So the grandfather teaches the son. He says, grandson, I want you to move that pile of dirt over there. I want you to move it over there. So the grandson takes his wheelbarrow and takes his shovel and says, all right, I'll get it done. There for a week. He goes and he moves a pile of dirt over there. And then the next day, Grandpa says, grandson, great work. I want you to take that pile of dirt. I want you to take that pile of dirt. I want you to move it over here. So he goes, well, I don't know why, but okay. So he moves the pile of dirt over there. Third day comes around. Grandson wakes up. Grandpa says, grandson, we got a lot of work to do today. And he's thinking they get to do something new. He says, grandson, I want you to take that pile of dirt and I want you to move it back where it was the first day. What's the lesson, potentially, they're trying to teach there? They're just trying to tick the grandson off? He probably did that. Okay, the story goes on for 7 days. I'm not going to tell you all the 7 days. But that's what it is. Move the pile of dirt around the acre here. What's he trying to teach grandson? Anybody? My boys this should sound real familiar to my son. What would I be trying to teach you? I'm not your grandfather, but y'all can imagine that I would do something similar. Do what I say and do it now. And when God says, circle around Mount Seir for many days, that's what they did. Go back that way. That's the lesson. If I tell you to walk in circles, you walk in circles. You can think it's a bad idea, but it's not your call. Go in circles. I would suggest that that is valuable only as an isolated lesson. But it is a valuable lesson. Shouldn't make a habit of just having people move around piles of dirt just because you said so. Pile of dirt, excuse me. Then we turned and set out for the wilderness by the way to the Red Sea, as Yahweh spoke to me, and we circled Mount Seir for many days. And Yahweh spoke to me, you have circled this mountain long enough. Now turn north and command the people, saying, you will pass through the territory of your brothers, the sons of Esau, who live in Seir. And they will be afraid of you, so be very careful. Do not provoke them, for I will not give you any of their land, even as little as a footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. Do not enter. Now, they actually do enter the land, right? But they're not entering it to possess it. They're passing through. You remember he said, and God covers that, right? Verse 6, you shall buy food from them with money, so that you may eat. You shall also purchase water from them with money, so that you may drink. For Yahweh your God has blessed you in all that you have done. He has known your wanderings through this great wilderness these 40 years. The Lord your God has been with you. You have not lacked a thing. So we passed beyond our brothers, the sons of Esau, who lived in Seir, away from the Arabah road, away from Elath, and away from Ezion-Geber. And we turned and passed through by the way of the wilderness of Moab. Then the Lord said to me, do not harass Moab. Do not enter. It's not yours. Do not harass Moab. Do not provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land as a possession, because I have given Ar to the sons of Lot as a possession. Does God keep his promises? Yes. And he doesn't take them away at the expense of other promises, right? This is not their land. They're just supposed to get around it. Then Moses gives an explanation. I like this here. The Emim lived there formerly, a people as great and numerous, meaning that great is not numerous. They're giants, like the Anakim, as tall as the Anakim. Like the Anakim, they are also regarded as Rephaim, but the Moabites call them Emim. There are giants everywhere, all over the place, seems like. We've talked about that, right? That they should have all, people presumed that they were all destroyed in the flood, and I think they were all destroyed in the flood. That's what but they say that in order to say that it doesn't recur. And it seems to me that angelic hybridization was at least, and possibly continues to be, a facet of human history, because they should not exist at this point in history, but they do. There are Rephaim, Anakim, Emim. And he says, the Horites formerly lived in Seir, but the sons of Esau dispossessed them and destroyed them from before them and settled in their place, just as Israel did to the land of their possessions, which Yahweh gave to them. Now arise and cross over to the brook Zered yourselves. So we crossed over the brook Zered. And that time it took for us to come from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed over the brook Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war perished from within the camp, as Yahweh had sworn to them. Moreover, the hand of Yahweh was against them to destroy them from within the camp until they all perished. So it came about when all the men of war had finally perished from among the people, then Yahweh spoke to me, saying, today you shall cross over Ar, the border of Moab. When you come across opposite the sons of Ammon, do not harass them nor provoke them, for I will not give you any of the land of the sons of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the sons of Lot as a possession. It is also regarded as the land of the Rephaim, for they formerly lived in it, but the Amorites call them Zamzummim. Sounds like Dr. Seuss named some of these people, doesn't it? The people is great, numerous, and tall as the Anakim, but the Lord destroyed them from before them, and they dispossessed them and settled in their place, just as he did for the sons of Esau who lived in Seir, which he destroyed the Horites from before them. They dispossessed them and settled in their place. even to this day. Now, did Esau have the same kind of covenant that Israel had? You remember? Anybody? I saw some heads shaking, right? Edom eventually gets wiped out. In fact, in Malachi, the first few verses of Malachi, which I just recently did a paper or something on, he says, you shouldn't even try to rebuild those cities because I'll keep knocking your blocks down. I'm committed to never seeing Edom as a nation arise again. So it's not the same, but at this point, they're not under that judgment. They're not under that discipline. And so the Israelites are to leave them alone. Even to this day, Moses is saying, to my day, right? And the Avim, who lived in villages as far as Gaza, the Caphtorim, who came from Caphtor, destroyed them and lived in their place. Arise, set out, and pass through the valley of Arnon. Look, I have given Sihon, the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land into your hand. Begin to take possession and contend with him in battle. This day I will begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples everywhere under the heavens, who, when they hear the report of you, will tremble and be in anguish because of you. By the way, this is the same language. It's an interesting comparison, the relationship that God uses to describe the animals of creation, the dread of men that goes into among animals. You ever wonder why? Like you walk into a clearing and you never see animals? They saw you coming. You have to be real sneaky to catch up on an animal. They have a dread among them. And God is elevating Israel in this capacity to that dominion level here compared to the peoples that they're to conquer. So, I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to Sihon, king of Heshbon, with words of peace. Wait a second. I thought they were supposed to destroy. Well, Moses sends them words of peace, saying, let me pass through your land. I will travel only on the highway. I will not turn aside to the right or to the left. Now, you may not realize that because you and I, we live in the United States. If we see Army stuff passing down the interstate, which is common, right? It's always ours, right? Like you're not paying attention. Like the German Air Force just moved out of Fort Bliss after 66 years or something. And so they had to go somewhere. Their equipment went somehow, but most of us didn't see it. If we see military equipment within the borders of the United States, none of us are accustomed to seeing somebody else's army march through, right? You would be concerned, rightfully so, if you saw a Chinese flag over a bunch of soldiers marching on the side of the interstate, right? I got 3 nods. Folks, let's wake up now. The Chinese military should not be in the United States in uniform with a flag marching down the street, right? Can we all agree with that? Okay, because there may be a chance under this president that we start seeing crap like that, and you need to know what the proper response is. Okay. It was a real clear concern. The Roman Empire had a standard. Their generals were not allowed to enter the city ahead of their armies. They had to come with their weapons behind and leave their army outside because it was a threat. So it's a weird thing that we don't immediately understand, but he's saying, trust us, right? We're just going to bring our whole army and everybody through your land, and we're just going to buy snacks on the way. I'm telling you, if a guy in a Chinese military uniform says he's just going to stop at Buc-ee's and get some beef jerky, don't believe him. Yes? Y'all ever been to Buc-ee's? Have y'all been to Buc-ee's? If you haven't been to Buc-ee's, you need to take a trip. Just go to Buc-ee's. They don't have one on the I-10 corridor for some unimaginable reason. But don't believe him. So Moses is not expecting to be believed. Sihon, king of Heshbon, verse 30, was not willing for us to pass through his land. For Yahweh your God hardened his spirit and made his heart obstinate in order to deliver him into your hand as he is today. And Yahweh said to me, see, I have begun to deliver Sihon and his land over to you. Begin to occupy that you may possess this land. Then Sihon with all his people came out to meet us in battle at Jahaz. The Lord and Yahweh our God delivered him over to us, and we defeated him with his sons and all his people. So we captured all his cities at that time and utterly destroyed the men, women, and children of every city. We left no survivor. We took only the animals, and as our booty and the spoil of the cities which we had captured. From Aroer, which is on the edge of the valley of Arnon, and from the city which is in the valley even to Gilead, there was no city that was too high for us. Yahweh our God delivered all over to us. Only you did not go near to the land of the sons of Ammon, all along the river Jabbok and the cities of the hill country, and wherever Yahweh our God had commanded us. So he said, there's nothing you did not achieve. There is no promise that God gave you that he did not grant you, as long as you did what he said to do, and as long as you followed his instructions. There was nothing that stood in your way. There was nothing that was too great for you to accomplish, as long as you did what God said. That's the big idea. They tell me in all my preaching classes over the years, you just got to get the big idea. You just got to get the big idea. I tell them, well, there are lots of ideas in that passage. I kind of object to the way they do it. They want you to synthesize it until it's almost not recognizable anymore. But Moses does have a big idea with this recording of their history, right? And that is that you do not have to worry about how big the people are, how tough they are, how battle-hardened they are, how tall their walls are, how much equipment they have. You do not have to be concerned with that, because I have declared it to be yours. And you go in and you possess it, and it's yours. All right? So that's where I plan to get today. Do we have any questions, comments, observations from that passage? From the record. It's important that we understand those things and their place. We got about 1 minute, but I'm probably going to steal that back from you at some point during Deuteronomy, so we can end here if there aren't any. All right, let's pray. Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you for your word. We thank you for Moses' testimony on behalf of Israel that informs us that your promises are perfect and that the results of obedience are guaranteed by your character, and that you keep your word perfectly, and we can rely on that just as they did then. And Father, we thank you for that. We love you. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.